After watching all 8 episodes of the Netflix live-action adaptation of One Piece, I have one thing to say. Netflix, get me on the next season, season 2. I will work for free as a consultant advisor. Just put me on this show. I want to be a part of this. The live action adaptation was good. If that's all you wanted to hear, you can click away now, but I will be breaking down why I thought this was good. I do want to give some time to talk about how this series really does impact people around the world who watch it and how much of a global impact One Piece has had on the anime community, especially in the past few years. And it's just such an awesome thing to even be a part of it as a fan, to see that after 20 years of watching, for me, I've been watching literally for 20 years, to see it come this far is super exciting. I think one of the biggest fears for a lot of fans watching this series was going into it, we've seen Netflix adaptations not do so well, but One Piece is different, so let's jump into it. I'm going to talk about the good, the not so good, how the series made me feel as a fan, Oda's vision and how that connected to the actors and the crew, as well as the global impact and cultural shifts in anime. Before I start though, I am a YouTuber here in Japan, and I am also a very avid One Piece fan. Just to give some credentials, I started watching One Piece when I was in 2002. I mainly watch the anime. I do read the manga occasionally just to go see the original work. One more credential is I even went on a Japanese game show in 2012 as Luffy. So if that doesn't tell you anything, I don't know what will. Future Max here. I also wanted to add that I have worked in production myself, working with Netflix Japan here in Tokyo, filming some YouTube content. So I have maybe a little bit of bias looking at it from a production standpoint and how much work goes into stuff like that. Just keep that in mind. But I digress, so let's just jump straight into it. Let's talk about the good parts. The good parts is they really did put the spirit of One Piece in this production. I think it was a mixture of obviously Oda leading the charge on this. The actors, they all actually like One Piece, and most of them have been watching it for years. I know Mackenyu always says he's Japanese. Of course he likes One Piece.
Were you guys a fan of One Piece before? Did you become fans working on the show?
Always was. I'm Japanese. Why would you ask me that question?
I feel like almost all the characters were very naturally, or all the actors naturally could play their characters, because that was, there was a part of that in them. And you know, even when Oda was casting for Luffy, I'm going to show you this video, but I wasn't sure how I was going to go with Iñaki Godoy playing Luffy, but I'd say for the most part he was able to get Luffy's fun-loving character, but also some of the seriousness to it.
でも本当に実写化で一番心配だったのがルフィみたいな人間が見つかるのかっていう話です。だからいろんなオーディションの動画をたくさん見てて、ひねきくんを見た時にちょっと笑っちゃったんですよ。もうまず僕の描く漫画みたいな人だと思ったから、もう直感的にルフィだって思った。
So of course, when this clip first came out, I was thinking, all right, is Oda just trying to play a little bit of corporate games here, and he has to like approve of the show no matter what? But after watching the series, I feel like everything he said up until this point was exactly what he thought. And you know, and maybe I should have trusted God Oda a little bit more, but after what we've seen with many adaptations, it was very hard. You know, I wanted to be optimistic, but it was very difficult to be completely on board with it. But there's so much love and passion I could tell behind this project, and that's why I think it was good. Especially for fans. It felt like even Matt Owens, I guess the showrunner, and people who are working on it behind the scenes actually cared about making this a fan film on Netflix, something made by fans for the fans. And it was obviously very difficult to put 45 episodes into 8 episodes. Of course, there are some things that maybe I could say I didn't like, but I am willing to overlook a lot of things just because I am so excited to even think that after 20 some years, this was even brought to light. And I think even Oda himself is so excited to show this series. He's passing on dreams, man. You know, life imitates art, as they say, and it almost feels like Oda is passing down this legacy through this live action adaptation to the younger generation, the actors here, the people who are working on the show, and he's literally giving dreams to other people. And okay, let's talk more about the good. The good. I know the main character is Luffy, but I wanted to say Zoro is probably one of the best things about this adaptation. Mackenyu, every time he comes on Gon steals the show. I think it's really cool that we have a Japanese actor who does speak fluent English, who can play this role so well, and that there's going to be somebody who's young coming up who is Japanese and yet can also speak English, that can do some sort of international role like this. I feel like there isn't really that many young Asian actors that are getting the spotlight, that are playing a cool character, and he is one of the best parts of the show. They did the three sword fighting style justice. It was fun to watch how they could even pull some of this stuff off. I said in my last reaction video that Mackenyu played a character in Rurouni Kenshin, and I was hoping that they would bring that into this series, and they did. They even put in like the exact same scene that I put in my reaction of him sliding. They put that in there with Zoro. They did a great job with the fight choreography. Obviously, it looked like a lot of it was kind of goofy because it's an anime. They had to do things to make it work. Maybe they had to slow down some of the fight scenes, but all in all, I thought some of Zoro's fight scenes probably were some of the best parts. Next thing I want to say, set design was massive. I was so impressed. I know that they spent lots of money on these episodes. They apparently spent like $18 million per episode, which is unheard of. Game of Thrones at the beginning was something like $6 million per episode, and eventually at the last season was like $15 million per episode. The sets were beautiful. It looked great. It was colorful, and I think each episode, it also did encapsulate some of what One Piece is about. When you go to a different island, it has a different vibe. When they go to Syrup Village, Usopp's arc, I felt like I was in kind of like Alice in Wonderland. They're filming it very colorful with these dynamic angles. It was just cool to see like how they would take something from the manga and anime and put it into live action, and they changed it up. And as a fan who knows how the actual series goes, I was actually kind of excited to see, okay, I'm gonna see how they take this direction with this arc, what direction they're gonna take. It was mostly in ways that I thought was fun. Like it felt like a 90s movie a lot of the time. At some points it felt a little bit like the Scooby-Doo movie that came out in the early 2000s, where things were a little bit like goofy and didn't really make sense, but it was fine because it was enjoyable as a movie if you don't really think about it too hard. I would say One Piece is kind of the same way. If you take it more as a retelling of what it looks like with real actors, almost like going to one of the Japanese stage musicals that they have. I mean, they've done Naruto here, they've done My Hero Academia, Attack on Titan. It's just fun to see how they can translate this series into a really compact way. So if you look at it as a fan going into this like, hey, I'm going to watch a musical and see how these actors portray the characters, it's an enjoyable experience because you can see how somebody in real life can take on these personality traits of each of the characters. Zoro, they made him more, I feel like, edgy and quiet. Luffy, they kind of toned down a little bit his goofy side a little bit. Usopp, they made him a little bit less of a coward and more of like a sly kid who is, embellishing the truth, but also kind of like a fun party guy. Sanji, they made him less of a simp, and they turned Sanji a little bit more into a player who likes to dress nice, look good. For the costumes, I think what they did great was some of the stuff, it's so ridiculous to see like Garp with his bulldog hat, but they literally keep the exact same thing, and when he comes on, you're like, wow, that looks really, really funny. I appreciate how they committed to so many of the things that are actually in the anime and manga itself. Another great thing as a fan of the original series is they also did keep the dynamics between characters so well. I think the actors did a great job here too. Sanji, Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp, when they're all at the Baratie hanging out, talking, and Sanji's flirting with Nami, and the other three guys are kind of laughing, and Luffy doesn't really know what's going on. I think that was just so well done. Shout out to also like Buggy Shanks. I think the actor for Buggy was hilarious. Great choice for making him as loony and goofy and a little bit crazy as possible. And Zeph, whoever played Zeph, I don't know the actor's name, he might have been one of the best casting choices in the entire series. He felt like a Gordon Ramsay character. He felt like a real person. Felt real. It didn't feel forced. Seeing also his hat, they made it super high. It's just like, I'm glad they committed to so many of these small things. I would say it's probably Oda. Oda drove this thing, and I have one more thing I want to share to you that Oda wrote himself. He said he'd been working with Tomorrow Studios and Netflix for quite some time now. Even though they understand each of the characters, we obviously come from very different cultures. So when it comes to entertainment, we have different codes, skill sets, and aims. Sometimes it could be frustrating for both sides. It felt like we're all trying to get to the same place, so how come we're not on the same wavelength? There was even a time when I thought, is a foreign production even possible? But then he did say, now each and every entity involved is working in sync and we're finally here. So it seemed like there was a lot of difficulty getting it to this point, but I feel like maybe Oda and a lot of people really had to put their foot down to keep things the way they are. And they did change, obviously, some story elements. They did try to maybe modernize it a little bit for the modern times, but it's like I'm willing to live with that because the main things were kept intact. Next, let's talk about the not so good. The first thing I want to talk about, the story progression, perhaps. They did jam pack like 45 episodes into this 8-episode series. Of course, it was an hour long rather than 20 minutes, but they did have to add a lot of elements. This was including things with Garp and Kobe. That did take up a lot of time, which took away from the other stories. So because they did this, I felt like episode 1 was just loaded up with a lot of characters. If you're a new watcher, it might have been very confusing, and as a fan who does know what's going on, it just made me feel like, wow, they're really rushing through all these characters, that it almost made it feel like, why are these characters motivated to do what they're doing? Of course, if you know the original series, you would know, but if you're just watching it from a live action standpoint, it did feel a little bit rushed. I want to jump into Chuu's face from the merman. Was very jarring and weird at first, but I ended up liking it at the end just because I was like, you know what, Chuu in the anime and manga, it does look really weird. It was funny. Like, I feel like there was a reason they didn't show Chuu's face in the trailers, but yeah, that was a little bit jarring. I will say I also was disappointed that they had to cut characters. I understand why they would have to cut characters, but it was sad to see Django have to go. Maybe it's because he was like way too much like of a Michael Jackson character that they would get sued if they put him in there, but Django being cut, Hachi being cut was sad. Understandable, but acceptable. The music, I think, was a little bit overused. The music, I feel like they only had one track and they just kept mixing up with the intense version of it versus like a quieter version. So maybe they put all the money in the sets instead of the music. So I will at least acknowledge though that they put in Bink Sake and We Are as much as they could, and that was some good homage to the fans, so I appreciated that. But definitely, like, some of the music, I was like, this sounds kind of like some of it just like royalty free music, and it wasn't very impactful or memorable. Maybe the biggest problem I had with the live action was Nojiko's character, who felt like they completely changed her personality. Her personality was, in the original manga and anime, just very understanding and like one of Nami's best supporters, and she played a huge part in, I think, keeping Nami sane, so that Nami knew that she wasn't completely alone. She had her sister, but in this live action adaptation they changed her so she was completely like hateful and vengeful for her sister and not supportive, and as a fan I thought that was not great. Nothing on the actor herself. I think she played what she had to do well, and I'm glad they still gave her the blue hair, the tattoos. They made her look. The wardrobe was great for almost all the characters, but that was it. I was just like, okay, personality wise, maybe this is the one thing where I was like, okay, why did you have to make it completely opposite to what it was in the original? So also, I will say maybe the walk to Arlong Park scene was not as much as I wanted to. You know, in the anime, it's such an iconic scene. I guess they didn't, it was difficult to make it one-to-one, but I am glad that they kept how Nami was actually stabbing herself. I think it's so important because that's how mad she was. I think, you know, obviously nothing will be as good as the manga or anime, but I still feel like they did it as much justice as possible. One more bad thing, maybe it's a good thing. Zoro had the most fight scenes that it took away, I think, from all the other characters having fight scenes. I feel like it was almost to the point where I was like, okay, it almost feels like Zoro's the main character here. They had to cut out Don Krieg versus Luffy. They had to cut out Jin versus Sanji. So they were really taking out a lot of these fights. Yeah, it felt like some of the fight scenes were kind of short. But at least it went to Zoro and Mackenyu, like, on the bright side. And also maybe they had to do that because no one is an expert in doing CGI for a rubber man fighting. Like, but there are plenty of sword fighters, so maybe that's where they change some stuff up. All in all, I'm going to talk about how the series made me feel as a fan, as somebody who's watching it for 20 years and has grown up with One Piece. And One Piece has been there through the darkest of times and the best of times. Basically, it feels like a friend in a way, just that has always been there. Is more than half my life. So if I'm looking at it from this fan perspective of somebody who's just so excited that my favorite show is finally seeing this level of recognition and love and real people's faces and actors put onto these comic characters, manga characters, anime characters, it's crazy to think about, you know, that this has happened. And it just shows how much of an impact the art that Oda has created has had on all these individual people to come together to make this one thing. To think that Oda is writing the manga almost every week and still puts in his time and energy for the fans to create a live action adaptation at the same time and actually have it be good because he's involved in it blows my mind. He cares so much about the series. He's literally probably shaving off years of his life. Like how Luffy lost 10 years of his life for the fans. Like, that's how I feel. Like, and to think that there's somebody out there like Oda who actually cares this much. Yeah, he's going for legacy at this point. He's very rich. You know, he's very wealthy. He has a family. He has a kid that he even has gone on record saying that he misses, and he's afraid that if he, you know, doesn't sleep at the studio sometimes, that he'll just stay home too long and take too much of a break. It's crazy to think that somebody is doing that, but I think it's because Oda is living his dream. You know, Luffy, dude, I'm sure the will of D is probably the will of dreams. Like, honestly, because Luffy has a dream and he wants to reach his goal, but at the same time he's bringing everybody else with him. And I feel like that is something that in life, as I get older, is something that I want to do as well. I want to see my friends succeed, and I want to keep going with what I'm doing. And, you know, Oda has given this idea to me, even as such a young person, that go for what you want, go for your dreams, and be unapologetic about it. That's like what Luffy is all about. And it almost feels like this adaptation is Oda giving these opportunities to these actors, to these showrunners, to these producers who have all reached this point that they can also do something that they want to do, which is create a beloved live action adaptation for their favorite series. It's almost like a dream in itself. So a big part about what One Piece is all about is that feeling, that spirit of going for what you want and bringing other people along the way with you, your nakama along the way. I feel like that is what the live action adaptation encapsulated and was able to capture. So without getting too sentimental, I did just wanted to say that because Oda has created such a good series for not just the fans, but just, oh my god, it's such a cultural impact. Just thinking about how he would feel getting it as a live action, and it just keeps going with it. I feel like he must be elated. It's great because we're all part of this together. It almost feels like we're all trying to push One Piece and anime and these good feelings and live your dreams together. So I know it's not perfect, but I'm willing to overlook all that because just I'm so happy to see that they actually kind of nailed this one and respected the original work. I'm thrilled. And I want to be a part of season 2, Netflix. So put me in there. I will work for free as a free consultant advisor. That's my review. Like, subscribe, comment what you thought about the series itself. Am I being biased? Am I just too much of a One Piece fan to see this for the flaws? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.